What you're hearing was not created by a human. That beautiful orchestral composition entitled Among the Stars was in fact designed by an artificial intelligence system. Welcome to Business Daily with me, Jane Wakefield. In today's programme, recorded at the annual TED conference in Canada's west coast city of Vancouver, I've been exploring the potential and the pitfalls for a future which humans share with artificial intelligence.
Our AI actually naturally discovers how to walk.
How can we really make sure that AI becomes not the worst thing ever, but the best thing ever?
Business Daily from the BBC. Trying to decide where artificial intelligence, or AI, is leading us is no simple task. It means many things, from autonomous weapons to computers beating humans at games of chess to driverless cars and robot assistants. What's clear is that there are no easy answers to how to navigate an AI-enhanced world, and that the ethical questions are becoming increasingly urgent. More on that later, but first, what are the weird and wonderful applications for this pioneering technology, and why should we all care? I caught up with MIT's Max Tegmark at TED. He explained why the conversations are so important.
Well, everybody's talking about short-term challenges with AI, job loss, privacy, but almost nobody's talking about the elephant in the room. What will happen if the ultimate goal of AI actually succeeds, if we can build machines that can do everything better and cheaper than us? What sort of future society are we hoping for if we succeeded? I feel it's just so important that this conversation isn't left to just a handful of tech nerds like myself, but that everyone can join it.
And what is it that you envisage being the future? Are you on the optimistic side of the fence or the pessimistic side, or do you toe a different line?
People sometimes ask me, hey Max, are you for AI or against it? I always ask them, are you for fire or against fire? Because it's equally absurd question. Of course, I love fire for keeping our homes warm in the winter, and I'm against it for arson. But look, AI and other powerful technology isn't evil, nor is it good. It's a tool that can amplify our ability to do whatever we want. And I am pretty convinced that if we one day build what's called artificial general intelligence, which we don't have now, AI which can do everything as well as us humans, then it's going to either be the best thing ever or the worst thing ever. And the interesting question for me isn't to quibble about how much we should worry. The interesting question is, what concrete stuff can we do right now that's going to help? For example, I think we should ban lethal autonomous weapons. There was another diplomatic discussion about it just this past week, which led basically nowhere, but there's been some encouraging noises from the UK military establishment that the UK actually want to stigmatize this, which I think will be great. Another thing that I think will be great if we can do is make sure that the growing economic pie that we can produce with AI gets shared so everyone gets better off. And then third, we really need to invest a lot in not just in making the AI more powerful, but in AI safety research to make sure that we transform today's buggy and hackable computers into robust AI systems that we can really trust. Because otherwise all this cool gee-whiz technology can be malfunctioning and harm us or get hacked.
With computer code, you can go through it and you can find errors and you can work out what you've done wrong. But it feels with AI that's more difficult because AI systems that use reinforcement learning are almost teaching themselves, and the people behind them don't entirely know how they've got there. So how can you build safety systems into a system that is quite impenetrable?
That's a great question, because the biggest recent breakthroughs have come from self-learning systems that do great stuff when we have no clue why. If you're sentenced to 5 years in jail and ask the judge why, and you're told, I was trained on 5 terabytes of data and my decision is final, beep, beep, boop, boop, it's not really very satisfactory. And you also don't want to put that kind of systems in charge of airplanes, power grids, and so on. I'm quite optimistic that we can actually ultimately transform these systems into equally intelligent systems that we can understand. And this is what we're working on at MIT, for example, in my group. That's an example of AI safety again. Transparency research.
We've heard a lot about the issues around data and feeding kind of systems, AI systems with data that in itself might be corrupted or might not be the best data to share. And yet there hasn't been many suggestions about what the alternative future is.
Well, the obvious thing we need to do is rather than get taken by surprise when things go badly with Cambridge Analytica or whatever, to instead be proactive and think a bit ahead. What could go wrong? And there's been a big culture shift here. As recently as a few years ago, most people would say, shh, don't talk like that. That's, Luddite scaremongering. And now people are beginning to say, hey, no, actually, this is just safety engineering. This is how we're going to make sure it succeeds. This is also why we founded this nonprofit, the Future Life Institute, that brings together AI researchers precisely to identify problems we want to avoid having. And I have to say that Google DeepMind, for example, who is the number one company trying to do generally artificial intelligence in the world, in London, they are very idealistic and really want to get ahead of the game and get things right. And it's wonderful to see this growing alliance between companies, academics, and other thinkers to see how can we really make sure that AI becomes not the worst thing ever, but the best thing ever.
More from Max a little later. Increasingly, breakthroughs in the world of AI have led to a whole new generation of AI entrepreneurs. Pierre Barreau is one. He's a musician, composer, and an engineer, and he is leading the charge for a collaboration between AI and humans in the arts, pushing the boundaries of creativity. That dramatic piece of piano music had an unusual composer, an AI. Tell me a bit about how you came to decide that AI was a good way of getting such beautiful music.
The idea is that there's a lot of content created each year out there, and a lot of that content is becoming more and more interactive. And all these interactive medias, they have increasingly large amounts of stories, hundreds of hours of stories, but only 2 hours of music, because it's really hard as a human to compose more than 2 hours of music. And so we thought that it would be great to have an artificial intelligence that could somehow scale in circumstances where human creativity alone cannot scale. Initially, honestly, we didn't think it was going to work, but it ended up working, and there we go.
So how do you train an AI to become a musician?
So basically, we showed Ava 30,000 scores of history's greatest composers, so the likes of Mozart, Bach, Beethoven, and the algorithm looks for patterns in that music, in the melody, in the harmony, in the rhythm, and it tries to make a mathematical model of what music is, in its opinion. It basically trains its understanding of music by taking a couple of bars of music and predicting what should come next in those tracks. And it compares what its prediction to what the composer actually wrote, and by making a sort of comparison, it can actually improve the next time it tries to predict music. And once it's done that, it can actually create totally original tracks just from one note given by us, the programmers.
And have you played this to music experts?
It was one of the first things that we did is exactly show this piece to a pianist and conductor who's very close to my family, without telling him who composed the piece, because that was, we didn't want to put bias in the conversation. And he thought I was the composer of this piece. So it passed what we call the music Turing test. One of the next steps, though, in creating music is also creating the right music for the right person. It's not enough to just create music for itself. If you prefer, let's say, more modern music, you might just be more moved by, let's say, the Beatles' music rather than Beethoven's music. With this subjectivity, it's really hard to define if it's, the best composer. Obviously, it's probably not. It's fair to assume it's probably not. But what we're trying to do is really create compelling music that's personalized for individuals' preferences.
You said that the AI had passed the music Turing test with the musical experts. What do sort of ordinary people think about this music?
I think people like it. If you like soundtrack music, cinematic music, it's definitely in that genre, especially the more orchestral pieces. Some people like it, some people don't like it. But other than that, I think overall it's very positive.
And is it easier to make a simple piano piece or a big orchestral piece?
It's definitely easier to make a simple piano piece. The reason for that is that we actually have an algorithm that makes an orchestration. So it takes a piano piece and converts that piece into a piece for orchestra. The challenge is that it becomes really hard to make sure that every instrument is playable by humans. So if it's just going to be synthesized with virtual instruments, that's okay. But if we actually want people to play that music, then it becomes problematic for very simple reasons. If you have brass instruments that play too many notes or too many short notes, they just lose their breath. So, something like that, it really prevents the piece from being played. So in that case, we need to have humans review the orchestration and clean it up and make it so that it can be played by humans.
That was Pierre Barreau speaking to me at TED 2018.
Foremost in all of our minds has been the loss and the grief felt by the people of Orlando. Most of us don't get our healthcare through the marketplace. We get it through our job or through Medicare or Medicaid. And what you should know is that thanks to the Affordable Care Act, your coverage is better today than it was before. Women can get free checkups.
That was a clip of former US President Barack Obama. Wasn't it? Well, no, it's a fake. Not that you'd know it to watch the highly convincing video. One of the most controversial talks here at the TED conference was given by the computer scientist Supasorn Suajanakorn, who, while at the University of Washington, created AI versions of politicians capable of convincing the human eye. It's a nightmare scenario in many ways. In the age of fake news online, the ability to create fake video clips. It brings a whole new dimension to fake news, doesn't it? Do you think it's sort of inevitable that a tool like this will be used in that way?
On one hand, we have this Photoshop since 20 years ago, but it doesn't really get into as a tool to spread misinformation. And maybe part of the reason is because we all know that photos can be Photoshopped, and I think if everyone's sort of aware that video can be also Photoshop, the chance of that happening might be much, much less. Photos and videos, on one hand, could be very easy to verify, especially videos. And the reason is because a video contains 10,000 frames, and you can detect one frame that looks wrong. Then you can say for sure that this video is fake. And it's a lot easier than photos. Because photos, someone can just spend a lot of time photoshopping one image. But on video, that's a lot of hard to make all the frames perfect.
So how do you see this application being used for good purposes?
Our real inspiration is from the Holocaust Project, which is where, you sort of try to make alive the chance of talking to a real Holocaust survivor. It's like a new kind of media, which if you can use it to pass along history lessons or for education, that could be a really powerful tool. One application would be, maybe if this sounds a little bit creepy, but you can imagine, try to create a model of your loved ones just to, re-experience that sort of good memories.
So you're thinking of using an avatar of someone after they're dead to remind you of the things that they did when they were alive?
I mean, that's just one of the applications that, it might creep someone out, but it might be very valuable for some people.
You're listening to Business Daily with me, Jane Wakefield. Kevin Franz is one of a new generation of Silicon Valley school kids who are designing AI systems in their summer breaks.
I'm Kevin Franz. I'm actually still in high school, senior year.
Oh, wow. Yeah. What is it that you are talking about?
Specifically, these AI that instead of learning from large volumes of data, they actually learn by themselves through trial and error.
And why is that better than giving AIs lots of data to learn with?
Let's say we're trying to teach a robotic arm how to pick up an object. You don't want to have to demonstrate it. You don't want a human to have to go and pick up a whole bunch of objects to show an AI what this behavior is. Ideally, you'd have an AI control an arm and figure out basically on its own how to do the task.
How does somebody in high school come to be working on these incredibly complex problems?
I essentially saw these articles online about AI has beat humans at this game, and I was like, that's really cool. I was just intrigued, how did they do this? And then I had to go figure it out. Going through all these lectures and courses online. A lot of these resources for learning how everything works is free online for people to just go and learn on their own. So that's what I did.
So what is it specifically that you've done that has led you to be at TED giving a talk?
I developed this method where we want to get these AI to learn general knowledge about our world. And the way that I thought we should do this is, what if we had an AI that could learn skills? Different skills on how to interact with the world. And then as it builds up these skills, it can apply them to new tasks. And my example is, here's a robotic ant that's trying to solve a bunch of mazes. And it has to essentially walk around until it reaches the goal state. But for an AI without any knowledge of the world, it doesn't even know how to walk. So it can't reach the goal. It takes a really long time. But if instead of focusing on just solving one maze, we try to solve 100 mazes, and we let the AI learn skills that are shared between all these mazes, our AI actually naturally discovers how to walk. Even though we never told it what walking looks like, it actually figured it out that learning how to walk is useful in this scenario.
So it's a bit like training a baby.
Exactly. You don't learn to stand before you know how to crawl. You take it one step at a time.
So if Silicon Valley's teenagers are keen to explore the potential of AI, are they in fact designing themselves out of jobs? There is growing enthusiasm among the tech community for some kind of universal income to be provided by government. Max Tegmark from MIT thinks it's not so simple.
I think in the longer term, if machines will be able to do everything we can do, we should let go of the obsession with having jobs altogether, because we want them to get income, to get purpose in life, to get a social network. And I think we can get all three of them without jobs in other ways. So it's really interesting for a country like England, as opposed to the one I'm working in right now, has national health and more of a tradition of using tax money to help their citizens flourish, to think about what are the best ways that you can ultimately transition to an economy where the government has enough money anyway from tax revenues from all the AI-powered industry that they can provide people with income, purpose, and the social network, in other ways.
So do you advocate a basic income?
I try to be open-minded. That's one idea. We should absolutely do pilot studies, but it doesn't have to be the only way. Instead of doling out cash to people, why not use the same money to hire people as nurses, as teachers? It doesn't cost any more to give someone money to work as a nurse than to give them money to do nothing.
It sounds as if ultimately you are an optimist. You see good things for AI. I know you don't want to choose a side, but I'm going to force you to a bit.
I'm not a naive optimist in the sense that I think it's going to be great whatever we do. We have the opportunity to create an amazing future where everybody's better off. But as Winston Churchill once said, right, blood, sweat and tears, we have to work for this. We can't just sit here as slackers and take as some sort of blind article of faith that, it's automatically going to be fine with all technology. Absolutely not. Why don't you ever read in the newspapers today about bioweapon terrorism and think of biology as this wonderful positive field that cures people? Well, heck, because biologists pushed really hard to keep it that way and ban biological weapons, right? That's exactly why we should now ban lethal autonomous weapons and similarly keep AI on the right track and steer the technology in the direction where it really will help us all.
That's all from Business Daily with me, Jane Wakefield. Next week, I will be exploring the tech innovations being created to solve some of the most urgent health and inequality issues. For more from Business Daily, please download our podcast.
In November 1970, a woman's body was discovered in a remote valley in Norway. All the labels had been removed from her clothes, disguises were discovered in her suitcases. And all these years on, her identity still remains a mystery. Our brand new podcast from the BBC World Service and Norway's NRK is investigating the case. We've given you a bonus episode this week previewing the series. To download and listen to it, search for Death in Ice Valley wherever you find your podcasts.